So Leo gave me a call. I was living next door to Leo at the time. And he said, I just spoke to Baz, and Baz is thinking about making The Great Gatsby into a film. And he was talking about you for Nick Carraway and me for Jay Gatsby. And he's in town, and he'd love to get together. And I forgot what Leo said, you know, are you available tonight or tomorrow night or something like that? And I said, sure. And so we got together that night or the next night and spent a few hours, you know, catching up and then talking about this story and what Baz was thinking, and, you know, and then almost 4 years later, here we are. It was a blast, and the whole process was a lot of fun because, as you know, have you spoken to Baz and have you talked to him before? I mean, Baz is terrific. You know, I auditioned for Baz for Romeo and Juliet for a part in that movie, and I did not get the part, but I remembered that audition for years because I had such a good time with him. He's you know, like Gatsby, he kind of puts you at ease right away and understands you. You know, in the book, Nick says something like, you know, his smile was one of those rare smiles that something like he understood you the way you wanted to be understood. And there's another little part there I can't remember, but that's how Baz is. He just gets in there with you, and right away you feel cared about, supported, and like you guys are going off on an exploration together. And that was my experience in like an hour-long audition, you know, 17 years ago or whenever Romeo and Juliet was. Maybe longer now. Maybe that was closer to 20 years ago. Anyways, and so that was the journey of the film. So, you know, again, that was 4 years ago, that conversation, and we had many steps along the way. We had lots of conversations, phone conversations, emails. We would get together and have lunches, record voiceover early on. Then we did a workshop with just Leo and I, then the whole cast. Then we got on the set finally, and it was certainly one of those things where, you know, you'd go to the set even if you weren't working, to a new set just to check it out because the work was so beautiful and grand, and you know, the details in the set as it would unfold, as Baz utilized the sets, you'd see all the storytelling and all the detail that was built into those sets. So in that way it was great, and also, you know, it gives you a kind of feeling of authenticity when you're playing in the scenes. We talked about Nick being a kind of grounding presence, and the audiences in, and being the kind of relatable character who is, you know, a very decent kind of Midwestern guy with you know, good morals, and from a family that is a hardworking family in wholesale hardware, and he goes into this world that is largely beyond his experiences, and a social set that's, you know, fancier than he is, and he gets kind of initiated into this world, and I think he has a blast, but he doesn't lose who he is. At the same time, he gets caught up and has some fun, and I think that, you know, we had this sort of framing device of Nick in the sanitarium, so we could check back in with Nick and see how this experience affected him. And it also gave us license to use the narration throughout the movie. And, you know, in the book, you understand how Nick is experiencing, you know, these scenes and these people. Even if he kind of floats back and he's observing, in the book, like, his voice is, you know, all throughout that stuff. But if you kind of pull it out, really, he's not participating in all of it. So we found a way to do that so we could be with Nick, and he is grounded, even though he kind of evolves through the story and participates more and more, and then ultimately is sort of disheartened and broken at the end when he's, you know, disgusted by people's lack of just common decency, I think. And then in reflecting, having some perspective on it, sees it a bit differently, and I mean, some of that stuff is the same, but he processes his feelings and he understands Gatsby better and his relationship with Gatsby, and ultimately inspired by that character.
The first thing Baz did was give us all of this stuff, all this paraphernalia, like books and videos, and we had so many visual references. But the women that he wanted me to focus on were Zelda Fitzgerald and Geneva King, who were the two sort of inspirations for Daisy. So I really just looked at a lot of their writing. A lot of the way that they wrote was so familiar to Daisy, and a lot of the way that people described them as well was sort of exactly how I imagined Daisy. So it was sort of based on those women. I think she's incredibly easily led. I think the relationship, it says in the book that she needs to be sort of moved by some force of something, and that turned out to be Tom Buchanan. And she kind of she sort of gravitates towards the strongest man in the room. So when she marries Tom, it's because he comes in and basically just takes her, and she kind of goes along with it. And when Gatsby reappears in her life, he represents everything that she had before she met Tom, which is sort of poetry and romance and freedom, and so that seems, you know, strong and appealing, but it's a fantasy. And Tom is the one with the strength who sort of grounds her in reality at the end of the day. Her position in life is to be very beautiful and to be very alluring to people, and she's sort of used to people looking at her, and she's very self-aware. She also, I think she's bored out of her mind, and I think so she plays these characters. And when she first sees Nick, she's sort of being silly and girly and having fun. And then when they go for a walk on their own, she starts saying how terribly tired she is of everything, and how sort of, you know, she's seen everything and done everything. She's so done. You know, it's just that she's playing this part of someone who's sort of, yeah, sort of completely finished with life. I've seen it, I've done it, completely experienced, so jaded. And it's a character. I think she just likes playing these different people. So having a kind of consistent idea of who she is quite tricky. I was completely amazed in the audition that he, you know, Leonardo DiCaprio was playing two parts, like sitting next to me on the sofa playing Gatsby and then jumping up to the other side of the room and playing Tom behind the camera. It was so charming and lovely. And yeah, he was amazing on set. He's so generous. I've never seen anything like how sort of committed he is to everybody else and not just himself. He does the most amazing performance and it's caught on film, and then the camera turns around onto the other actor and he gives exactly the same level of intensity for that person to help them, which was amazing. Yeah, it's sort of eccentric and sort of brilliant, and really adds a sort of sense of like old Hollywood, you know, which I think was great for this film. It has I had fresh flowers in my dressing room once a week, and he would come and pick me up from the cast area and take me by the hand and walk me onto the set, you know. So amidst all this sort of chaos and these huge scenes, he treated everything with such delicacy, as well as having the ability to whip everyone up into a complete frenzy whenever he wanted to. Yeah, 100%. They informed the characters so much. And actually just conversations with Catherine about what I was going to wear were really helpful for that, and the jewellery.
Much so. It felt very cool to go back home and shoot something of this scale and have your general be an Australian. But, you know, an Australian who is probably, in my mind, the most qualified person to turn that book into a movie because of his sense of visual scale and his interest in tragic love stories.
Oh, are you kidding? I did. I mean, it was so nice. I remember one of the cameramen was filming me and he goes, "Hey, g'day, Isla." And I had worked, he goes, "I was on Home and Away with you." Like, he had worked as a cameraman on like a TV show that I did when I was 18 or something. So it was like 20, it was amazing.
So that was the end of the day of, you know, we shot a lot of technically organised setups that day. And then at the end of the day, he kind of let us roll for 10 minutes with 3 cameras and basically give the spectrum of a party from the beginning of an evening to what would be the end of the evening, and crunch maybe like 6 hours into 10 minutes. But we could rip stuff apart and, make out and break things and drink and,
It was so good. For someone like me who's literally never partied, it was a dream come true.
The world at large finds that hard to believe, Isla. We don't believe it. But it's true, apparently. Well, my feeling was the excess was real. The detail in the costume, in the set was real. Maybe real +1?
Yeah.
But real detail. So it felt like walking around inside a real place to me.
Well, I was lucky that they cast Joel because I didn't have long to kind of build like a romance in my imagination. But because he's Australian and I've known him for a long time, that was kind of familiar.
You're about to tell me that you already had a romance with me in your head.
That's a lot of the work. I feel like for me at least, when you I often get cast as like have to have a love interest in something, and that's really the most amount of work because you have to keep it alive in your head when it's not real, No,
Well, Tom has his opinions, and when you have that much money behind you, I guess you feel, a certain station in life that you're somewhat untouchable and that people listen to you all the time. And, it's like very famous people. I'm sure they spend a lot of time being listened to and agreed with, and maybe Tom's a bit like that. But I had to find a way to make it good for me, that I wasn't just some kind of mustache-twirling villain, and that to me was a lot about the relationship of the interest of finding an oasis with a girl who was of a different kind of status than me, and having real feelings, albeit confused, for her,
I just found Baz to be a complete gentleman. He is such a character. He's dressed immaculately, carries a teacup. He is every bit as, he speaks in poetry and prose. I mean, they've got the most figurative language. He's just a wonderful leader. He's so charismatic too. I can't say that enough. I mean, I felt completely safe in his hands, and even when he pushed me in places that I felt a little uncomfortable, I had to do larger-than-life things, like come down stairways and talk to sort of no one and, like, make a speech into the air at a party, things that you would feel like, as an actor, so much of it's reaction. So if you're not speaking to someone directly, it's quite hard to, I find anyway, quite hard to do that stuff. But I felt so safe with him. I mean, I loved working with him.